Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we'll bring you an issue number 22 by Olexiy Arestovych, an interview to Vasil Golovanov. They dive into interesting corners that usually are left outside of the scope with other streams. So, according to your views and comments, we see that you guys do appreciate these interviews. So that's what's coming in the next hour. There are a few more specials in the works, not necessarily news related, but of very curious nature. So unfortunately, they all are over an hour long. People like to talk, it takes a bit to translate them. So they'll come later, probably later this week, towards the weekend. And special thanks go to our members. Of course, Bill, thank you for your super thanks. You are continuing to support our channel, and we totally see and appreciate that. And among the members, we want to mention today Olga Lewis and Yelena Einhorn. Thank you, dear supporters. And with this, let's go to Golovanov number 22. Today they talk about what may happen if the West wakes up. Enjoy. Dear viewers, it is 9th of December 2023, live stream. Olexiy Arestovych, good evening. Glad to have you with us. And of course, I start every stream with thanking Ukraine military. Thank you for providing us with even an opportunity to continue working. I'll start with some questions that you guys left under a previous stream. Do not forget you can send more during this stream and more for the next week. So, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Umerov, made a statement that Ukraine is preparing tools for 2024 that will help us to expel Russian terrorists from temporarily occupied territory of Crimea forever. Despite having a mighty fleet like Russia did, we forced their navy to leave a temporarily occupied peninsula, and we have more things coming down the pipe for 2024 to make sure they withdraw from our Crimea forever. That's what he said. Olexiy, what do you think about these new tools? I'm a big skeptic, Vasily. Unlike anybody else, I would love it to be true, but I'm still a skeptic because what we can talk about technically, tools that would allow to dismantle Crimean bridge and make it unusable. And then Crimea becomes dependent on the naval supply. And then the second tool set would be something that would be effective against Russian military navy ships. That would allow to disrupt that. And third is perhaps weapons that allow to target Russian groups in Crimea, Russian military bases in Crimea, with super high precision. We kind of technically have the first and the second and the third, but the question is about the efficacy and how much we have, and also Russia is not sitting there waiting for us to hit them. Their radio electronic interference system are rather effective, and they are not allowing us to just come in and do that. So in order for something to appear on the front that can change the situation on a single direction on the operative level, if we had these means, we could have resolved this issue on the way to Crimea, probably, right? Not in Crimea, but probably break the front towards the mouth of peninsula, and then we would be able to reach Crimea directly with other means that are less expensive, with the same HIMARS and artillery systems. So I'm thinking that this is too loud of a statement. I don't know what inspired Umerov to make it, but I think it is an exaggeration. Well, in God's ears, right? Indeed, of course. I would appreciate and I would love it if we had magic tools that would allow us to win on the battlefront drastically. And I just cannot remember situations like that in wars when, we didn't have something, and then all of a sudden something appeared that allows to push the enemy way far away. Maybe nukes that they played this role in the Second World War. What if it's a couple aircraft carriers with some Tomahawks and all? Oh, yeah, that of course. If he somehow made an agreement with the Sixth Fleet of the United States, that would be a different story. But even that, it would be a serious threat for the front, but how do you push out, how do you physically kick out the infantry, the ground forces from Crimea? Because these are people who fortified themselves there, who need to be pushed out with a grenade and a bayonet. You would not be launching tomahawks at individual infantrymen, right? So on the larger scale, yeah, you can cut the supplies off. You can cut off the bridge or the landline. Crimea by itself doesn't really produce anything for those 2 million people that live there. But we're not going to expel civilians. Let's talk about 45,000 military group that Russia brought there. So they need to supply them daily, weekly. Of course, if we disrupt that, that would be a big plus. But Russia is not going to just sit and twiddle their fingers waiting for us to succeed. They'll be using other measures, maybe on other parts of the front, or taking other political measures to address that, or even physical, maybe drop more supplies. So that's why, yeah, there is always a ongoing tug of war on the front. And even with Crimea, yesterday, Theodosian oil base blew up. That happened, unfortunately for the occupants. But and we are making some good moves there, but it's a bit premature to announce that we will expel them physically. This is too loud, in my opinion. Next information: the coordinator of the Security Council of White House, Kirby, is commenting that Putin sincerely hopes that United States will stop supporting Ukraine, and it will be a great present for Putin. And he says that if Kirby says that if that happens, the price of that will be absolutely tragic for Ukraine. And I think we need to translate that from diplomatic, because if Ukraine loses, then it'll be the infantry and warfighters from the NATO countries and the United States fighting this war with Russia if Ukraine collapses. Oh yeah, Biden and Austin also commented on that, and they both said that in case of Ukraine collapse, NATO will be fighting a joint Russian and Ukraine army. And it was a direct quote from Biden. He was pushing for Congress to vote a few days ago, and it's obvious that if United States withdraw and Russia occupies Ukraine, then of course part of Ukrainian people will be executed and sent to gulags. The other part will be formed and sent to the front or to the border with NATO. And imagine an army, 410,000 of Russian troops plus about 1 million of our troops. NATO will feel itself really bad at this moment, and they'll be biting their elbows, but it will be too late. And there are actually three interesting moments here. First, when Arestovych made an argument of this, only the laziest didn't say, oh, here is the FSB agent finally coming out. He's talking about joining Russian and Ukrainian armies together. When I said that, I remember in Tallinn, I had a group of Lithuanian TV who tried to harass me with screams that, what are you talking about, traitor? And now, okay, you can maybe that same group of TV can run after Biden and Austin, who bring up the same arguments. Perhaps I just mentioned them a few weeks earlier. Second, if administration of Biden has to use these logical propositions, that tells that situation is rather dire politically. And I'm not going to reference insight, although I do have some. This is somewhat questionable and not really believed much references recently. So let's just look at, for those who are skeptical, let's look at the overall structures and what's happening. Recently, it was mentioned in the news that when Austin was talking to the congressmen who are sabotaging the vote on Ukraine support, he actually brought it physically in a conversation with them that if you guys will continue sabotaging, that I'll draft your relatives to fight the war in Europe after Ukraine falls. That is once again reinforcing that same view. And third is that threat is absolutely real. And the sooner Europeans will understand that, the better it will be for both Europeans and Americans. But frankly, looking at what's happening here, I'm not a strong believer that they will realize all that. Dear friends, let's continue. But before that, I still implore you to please click the like button Right, we all don't like mentioning it, but I have to because we have 12,000 people watching us live and only 2,000 likes. So, guys, can you please bridge the gap so I wouldn't remember about that till the end of the stream? Please. All right, next information. In Tarnitsky region of Kiev, in one of the gyms, people noticed representatives of the military drafting commission, and they were giving writs to the visitors of the gym. And before that, people noticed them at different stores, different public events. So, on one hand, we understand that it's important to continue mobilizing our society. On the other hand, it's risks for business. And I would quote Romanenko here, where he mentioned that similar operations will be conducted in movies, in restaurants, in different public places. So we have the old dilemma: mobilization versus the economy. If to not say wider, stated wider, mobilization against social comfort. And if the government is emphasizing that we have to mobilize, and the government says we have to because there's no other way to hold the front, then it means that the government doing that would need to offer some systems to compensate businesses on that. Not just to give them money, but find ways to allow them to catch up on the economic losses caused by all these activities. And there are no real actions yet. There are some statements by the heads of certain committees in the government, but there is really no active plan in work. This road is to nowhere, that this will lead just to social issues, and it likely will explode at certain time in a way that government definitely will not appreciate. And mobilization is one of the systems that, of course, would support front and all the military effort, but it also has a potential to kick the stool from under the government and really create a big strain in the society. And Mariana Bezugla recently wrote an article about all these issues, and one of them is a very peculiar. They removed semi-suitable group from military draft because it actually, why is it important? Because it affects a large swath of people who were previously considering themselves to be only partially suitable, so they would be the last ones to draft after everybody else. And right now they removed this category from law, so these people become either non-draftable or draftable. And now they're also talking about lowering down the lower bracket from 27 to 25. And when this age bracket will be lowered to 18, there'll be a lot of parents asking questions and moms asking questions that government definitely would not like. And now let's remember Menor Game, a marshal, the defender of Finland, a good friend of Skoropadsky, and basically the one who did a very successful career in Finland, which Skoropadsky could not, and due to certain historic events. And they both were graduates of the Tsarist Imperial Military College. And when Menor Game was asked how was he so successful fighting off the Soviet invasion in winter before the Second World War, he said, before making people fight for your country in minus 40 degrees winter, you need to create a country worth defending for, worth fighting that fight for. And I would post a question here: how many Ukrainians actually value independent Ukraine to be a real value? And second, how many Ukrainians consider their government that treats them the current way, the way it does now, to be a valuable asset enough to go fight for it in war? And I think we would not like the answer. I think in reality, there might be 3 million people who will still go, and the rest will start voting with their feet. And we're talking about roughly half of adult male population of the country. Many of them are already voting this way. There was a head of border service, security service, and he said that 25, 30 men daily risking their lives trying to cross, they're captured, trying to cross the border in one direction. This is roughly about 1 brigade a month and 12 brigades a year. So add 4 more brigades of the runaways and you get 4 military corps. By the way, in our counteroffensive on the south, there were only 3 military corps running the campaign. So a large group of our society is trying to avoid participating in that military action, and some of them are running. Others are just in the hiding, refusing to register. And overall, that comes to about half of our adult male population. So a question to the government, what have we done so impressively well that half the population is refusing to defend our country? And if we're talking about Maidan, about which Zelensky was warning people, then we may find ourselves in a very peculiar situation when everybody was waiting for some revolt in Russia. But it would be curious if in Russia they will run this fake election campaign and appoint Putin again, but in Ukraine we will have a revolt against the government mobilizing people in that fashion. It'll be a rather funny proposition. Right, in parentheses, it's a bitter irony. And we understand that all these events like that, they weaken the government and the country during the war, right? I'll put it this way. The government with the policies they conduct are weakening our country much better than all these opposition statements. And, right, we're talking about the serious events. We're talking about the policies. And the way they're doing, it's not exactly right. Because, for example, when they're trying to grab a guy from his wife and a child to go fight to war, and people are making ad hoc protest at this location, nobody paid them, right? This is not Russian propaganda or anything. But yeah, right, but we shouldn't be calling to that. We're not calling to that. We're discussing scenarios, and scenario thinking is not prohibited in our country, right? Yet, at least right now. All right, let's make a theatrical pause here. Next question from viewers. If there is a danger to Zaporozhye for a Russian advancement, no, they don't have enough strength to cut a part of Zaporozhye away from the front. They're preparing probably a big offensive for spring after Putin will be re-legitimized in his electoral activity in Russia in lieu of that. And what time frame would that be? April? I don't think anybody can tell you, but I don't see that being anything exotic. They have a political task of, they call it liberating Zaporozhye, Donetsk, and Lugansk. And Zaporozhye and Khmelnytsk are Zaporozhye and Kherson are secondary targets. Donetsk and Lugansk regions are primary because they included them into the constitution of Russian Federation. So they need to provide for fulfillment of that statement. And most of them are already occupied, and they'll be fighting for occupying the remainders of those regions. I don't know if there'll be a risk to our northern borders, Kharkov, Sumy, Chernihiv, Kiev, but they may try something there just to distract us, probably. And I think their ideation, I calculated it rather accurately. I have an idea that their main task is to obtain significant results by the middle of electoral campaign, probably towards summer next year, electoral campaign in the United States, and enter American presidential elections in this fashion using Ukrainian question, which is very hot and contested in the United States and will probably be even more hotter, more contested by the end of summer. So do we have enough powers to resist that? If we will be behaving ourselves smartly, then yes, we do. But what do I imply by smart? First, we need to build strategic fortifications all along the front line. North, west, south, north, east, and south. our line of Zelensky or line of Zaluzhny, however you call it, because our troops, even in the field where they dug some trenches with their hands and shovels, they are rather well holding the front line with rather big losses for Russians. If we will have good fortifications, the ones that we saw while breaking in the south front, 2 or 3 story structures made of concrete, and they look rather fantastic quality wise, and they were built by civilian companies, and I'm sure our companies can build just as well. And then the pressure on attacking Russians will grow 50%, and we will lower the pressure on our troops by another 50%, including the losses. So that would definitely be able to change the situation. So the troops will be able to spend less shells, spend less ammo, and lose less people. So we needed to do that a while ago, but at least we need to rapidly build it up now. Second, we need additional military aid, not even financial, but military aid. And we're talking about military because, of course, we need money, right? But you cannot load money in the cannon. So we need artillery shells, and we need additional ammunition and artillery systems and everything else. There are probably only 2 sources right now that we still haven't tapped much. So first of them would be South Korea. They accumulated a large warehouse, large depot storage of shells and other munitions. And second, United States. And of course, our immediate neighbors, who sometimes, when they swap the armaments for their corps, for their armies, for their military groups, when they just swap the munitions for the newer ones, they can send the outdated ones to us. And in the United States, Biden can actually can refresh Lend-Lease, and there are other discussions being conducted here. There are other ways to send us munitions from the United States, but it needs to happen. And bottom line is, unless we have at least 2 shells for every 10 that Russia sends in our heads, and right now, according to calculations, Russia is capable of producing about 1 million and maybe additional whatever stock from Korea a year. So we need at least 300,000 to keep the parity, or 200,000 at the bare minimum. Or if we barely hold it at 1-to-5 ratio, we can hold the line. But since Europe promised to give us 1 million and gave us, in reality, 450,000 shells, and I suspect they only could manufacture 300,000, so they found 150,000 somewhere, maybe Korea, maybe somewhere else, purchased or swapped or whatever. And of course, we need bullets and the rest. But if that continues to happen, then we can hold the situation. Yes, it will be more difficult. It will be bloodier because the enemy brings more FPV drones to the front line. They have rather effective radio electronic warfare systems. But at least we can hold defense in this case and break their ideation for the next year. And I can remind that their ground forces are not in the best shape. So if to take a regional center, such as Bakhmut or Avdiivka, you need to aggregate your resources for 4 months and then fight for 4 months to take it, then this war is not exactly fruitful or positive for the Russian society. And problem for us in this case remains that we still need to explain our people why do we have to wage the war this way, and why do people still need to leave their families and go to the front with the risk of death or dismemberment. And given that we have 4.5 million who are avoiding registration, I would say this is a problem of not the whole society, but a significant part of it. And summing it up, I would say, so if we manage to sustain the inflow of munitions and arms in the same fashion, then at least we can hold the current front line. Perhaps Russia can take another 2 regional centers, but that's not the failure. This is just a slight change of the front line. And the question remains, how do we achieve that and where do we take arms? But unfortunately, both solutions are now on the extraordinary measures table, because half a year ago they were not so critical. A year ago they were far less critical. When Putin made his decisions about his military-industrial complex, we failed to use that time frame to do the same, and we lost a lot of time. And our allies also lost time to ramp up their production. So it is not fully lost now. We can still do it, but I don't know if we will. All right, thank you. Dear viewers, please do not forget to click the subscribe button to Alexei's channel, to Golovanov's channel, and of course to the privateer station if you are listening or watching that in English. It would be nice to have a few more subscribers by the new year. A present for the new year, right? Let's make presents, guys. Do not forget to click the button. Right, you don't need to go anywhere. Just click the button. That's a good enough present. All right, let's continue further. Another question from viewers. What do you think Putin's words meant? We will show you the real decommunization at the beginning of his message at the beginning of invasion. Why did he bring that? Well, look, right now their propaganda is making an interesting pivot. Not all of it, but part of it definitely is making a statement that we're not fighting with Ukraine, and we're not fighting with Ukrainian people. We're fighting with the part of Ukraine that is anti-Russia, and we desire to destroy and force them to capitulate. But Ukrainians, otherwise, if not brothers, then they're very similar to Russians, and that's part of their commentary there. Why Ukrainians are fighting so well? Because they're basically same Russians, and it's only Russians who can fight that well. So that's kind of the tune they're playing. And denazification and decommunization and all these Asians was addressing that part of Ukrainian society that they meant. And they wanted to show how it's done. And yeah, they did. The cadre military were wasted in the first half a year, 6 months, and then all their plans were scrubbed. Right? We shouldn't recall those statements, banal, that they threw Kiev in 3 days, and Lukashenko and Simonyan laughing at their streams on the TV. Right. Okay, another uncomfortable question. Why Alexei thinks that he has any chances at the elections, given the light that he was presented in the Ukrainian media? And most people in Ukraine are aware of his persona in that light, and I'm not sure they know him otherwise. Well, I am not thinking to take that. I'm just going to give you a chance to vote for me when I show to the elections whenever they happen. And my personal life will probably be better if you don't vote for me, because running all these activities in Ukraine in the way Ukraine will be at the time of elections, that's a hefty task. It's like trying to save the bus when it's about to fall off the cliff. That bus is burning and everybody hates the driver. And if you think that it's like a lottery golden ticket for me and main happiness in my life, no, it's akin to going to the guillotine to get beheaded. And if you do not insist on electing me as the driver or the leader in that burning bus, then I would not be too terribly upset. But would you be upset at the result of it? So, as for my work, most part of my work is not too public, is not too visible. And I have enough satisfaction and enough state of mind to not bring it all up to light. Some of it needs to remain non-public. Others, yeah, when I was doing Fagin streams and I was talking from the pulpit in the president's office, yeah, that's the visible part. But there's a lot of work that should not be presented. And you can't even, because it's informal, it's communications. First of all, it would be incorrect to discuss the conversations I'm having with influencing people in governments and all. So you can just follow me in my public statements and public speeches. And if you don't like me, don't vote for me. Sure, you have a choice. You will have a choice at that time to cast your vote. And if you don't like me, you'll have a different driver of that burning bus. Do you think there'll be a lot of people willing to get elected? I think that by the time when elections will really start, the situation will be so dire that it might be rather difficult to be looking for the candidates by the election commission in the same gyms and trade centers, right? because I suspect it may be at risk, the country may be so at risk that the position of power might be like a hot potato tossed around. And the worse situation will get, the most dire it will get, the less appealing that position would be for most of the candidates. Alexei, how do you see the security proposition for the Baltic countries for the next year, or maybe 2025? I think Russia will never, ever leave the situation as it is now. When the Finland Strait basically go into the Baltic, is essentially territorial waters of NATO countries. It's so narrow that Estonia and Finland are generally covering that strait, and that annuls 300 years of Russian politics in that region, for which they spilled a lot of blood and in different wars. And I said back in June of this year to the population of to one of the summits in the Baltics, saying that if you think Russia will abandon this topic, you are terribly wrong. You're gravely wrong, and they will be using all kinds of warfare and effort to do that. And Baltics is a very hot zone of either hybrid or direct conflict. Another question about Ukraine, Alexei. Do you think Ukraine can become financial Mecca for investors? No, I don't think it's realistic to think of this right now. I think we need to provide our internal conditions and make sure that our banking system is working, first of all, for our internal consumers, because right now it is making money on the government investments and government guarantees. Government is printing out certain value papers, banks are buying them, and the government is paying the banks back. So now it's sort of cocooned within itself without providing much aid to the country. So once again, government prints the guarantees, banks are buying them, holding them, and the government is paying them money with a 9% on top. So where these money are going, that's a great question for investigation. And all that massive money is walking out there between these two hotspots and not really reaching our industry, the ones that could be producing the drones, the missiles, the mortars. And if we, believe me, if we just stopped this gray scheme, we would have our own financial Mecca, just funded by our own money. And if we just repeat what they did in Russia, and they did not invent anything, they repeated the same thing that Americans did after the Second World War, that Poles did when they were repairing their roads. When the banks give credits to manufacturing companies provide resources to building companies, and they together build roads or do whatever, increase the economic output. But the government prohibits this money from leaving the country and uses tight methods of control so they don't leak. And Poles built their roads in 5 years, and they actually amped their economy significantly by doing it this way. And we did a similar road effort, but unfortunately for us, we used other resources and we allowed to export the capitals. So Russians did the same thing. They're giving large, at low percent credits for military producers. They create military equipment and they produce, manufacture whatever they allowed, and they give it back to the country. They sell it back to the government. And since they forbade to export the money, what happened? They actually allowed to devaluate the ruble a little and to print more. And because you can actually hold inflation by not allowing the currency to be exported at large. And instead, our banking system is running a set of gray schemes to enrich a small circle of rather corrupt individuals. But for real manufacturing sector of the country that is fighting for its own survival, as they like to claim, and after putting the national Ukrainian shirt on, unfortunately, the real production center doesn't really get money. And just that would oil up a lot of mechanisms to start working. And consider that statement an official signal to our top-level corruption system. What do you say about the sales of Ukrainian land? Olga is asking. Whom? Yeah, that's a weird question. Whom we talking about? Selling to whom? To Ukrainians? To transnational corporations? So I would say, first of all, for international conglomerates, for large companies, you don't need to sell them forever. You can send them, allow them to lease it for long term. And then you can put certain terms that if they are purchasing land, for manufacturing, they need to hire local labor, and they need to use a certain percentage of their proceeds here in Ukraine. So it's all addressable. You just need to take a look at what's the economically most feasible way to do that. You can just lease it for 49 years or 99 years. The technologies remain, the personnel getting trained, and that's contributing to the economy of the country. And another positive thing we can do, we can request these transnational corporations, if, for example, they're using resources and mining anything, we may want to put additional condition that at least they need to do the initial processing. So, for example, if they're in the agricultural sector, do not export grain, export flour. That's already a value-added product. Or concentrated juices, right? Instead of just fruit for export. So why we're not doing that? That's a rhetorical question. Probably in the same basket, why we're not building the Surovikin defense line, right? What do you want to say right now to the Western partners of Ukraine? I want to say the same thing as President Biden did. If you'll be behaving in the same fashion, you will lose this war in the most painful way, and you will get a united potential of Ukraine and Russia on your NATO borders. And it will be a rather strong blow from which I'm not sure you will recover. In my estimation, the West right now is losing in trends, but if they continue that line, they'll lose utterly. Another question from viewer. I understand that FPV purchases and production in Ukraine is growing, but Russian side of manufacturing FPV is also growing. Now, given that we're destroying 50 or 100 units of their armor per week, how long will they have their reserves for? Last them through. Well, do not mix the way they fight near Avdiivka, where they decided to probably get everything destroyed that they have of those 3 armies fighting for it. If you believe the fresh data from experts, Russia is producing about 300,000 drones a year. We're producing 50,000. And of these, we only make 20 that we fully manufacture, and the rest is just assembly from Chinese spare parts, so it's not full production. Same thing in Russia, but their own production is growing. And correlation 30 to 300 to 50 is already a bad one, right? But we are on the trend here. And if you're saying that it's only their equipment that's getting destroyed, our equipment is also getting destroyed with their drones. So the right question would it be enough equipment for Russia and for Ukraine? How long can we last? Because if, for example, they had more equipment than we did, but we destroy 5 times more, then we can somewhat keep the parity. All these numbers that are being brought, they're not absolute numbers, right? In absolute, you can be happy about destroying 400 units of armored vehicles, and they only destroyed 100 of Ukrainians. But the fact is that if they had 800 and we had 150 to start with, then they have 300 left versus our 50. And that's not a good situation. So you always need to look in the whole picture. Right, but we have Western partners eager to help us. Where, Vasily? When the whole NATO, including the United States, is manufacturing 300,000 artillery shells a year. That's what Russia was shooting at us when they were taking Popasna, Solidar, and the rest. I'm hoping, though, for Apache, for Hawks, and other, maybe helicopters and other equipment. Oh, Vasily, I'm talking to them. They're actually not too far from where I am, but I'm not hopeful for much. There is a very small probability that they'll increase their help. You know, I'm observing an interesting correlation. Let's tell it to our viewers. I'm here in Kiev in Ukraine. Olexiy is in the United States. And it appears that the closer you are to Kiev, the higher the belief in the United States. All right, because you need to be present here and talk to them in person on these topics. Because when you communicate with them, you tell them, guys, if you continue the same fashion, we'll be physically gone. We will be no more. But they're answering, yeah, it is very sad, but the wall between us and Mexico is more important for us currently. And As I understand, Alexei, it's not just about the wall, right? Right. It's about the law and the immigration. If so, you understood what's happening in the United States. Republicans have been losing for a significant part of recent history, recent time frame. Democrats are dominating since Obama, roughly for about 10 years, right? Republicans had some takeovers, but still. Why? Because Obama figured out one of the key elements. For example, he installed Obamacare to be able to allow the people with lower income to pay for their insurance. And he figured a way to use immigration policies to turn some of the states into blue states, so they keep voting for Democrats. And Republicans are usually conservative group. Many of them are believers. They solve a lot of questions in their churches, and they're also very sternly pro-American, just like the core American values. This is the collision of two different types of development, two visions for the future of the United States. So now, when Republicans are exchanging the vote for aid to both Israel and Ukraine, as in one package, it wasn't even voted in preliminary hearing, and every day they state the failure in progress on this topic, the failure in communicating and negotiating on this topic in Congress. They are setting up to defeat Democrats, to deliver them the mightiest blow. Because if Democrats are to vote for the wall, they will lose enough voters as a result. And Republicans that are opposed to break the trend of the last 15 years or so, to position them to win, for a big win for a Republican agenda, which also has certain stalemate future elements in the future, but that's a whole other conversation. And they're very stern in these goals that they set, because they actually are fighting a religious war in their view. And I'm communicating with a lot of them, and their vocabulary very often includes words holy war, Bible, devil. And they're telling me straight that LGBT propaganda, things that Democrats brought to American education system, that teachers allow or tell boys and girls that they can change their sex with chemical and medical means, that you can choose which bathroom to go to. So Republicans see that, conservatives see that as the direct attack from a Satan. And when you come to them and tell them, guys, there'll be no more Ukraine if you don't help us, and you'll be facing a much dire threat after that. But they're telling you that for victory over Satan, even Ukraine is not too high a price to pay. Even the United States is not too high a price to pay. It's a question of who wins, God or Satan. We, of course, are for the God. And these are the ladies and gentlemen who are the sponsors, the key sponsors of Republican Party, who are setting tens of $millions to support it. That's how they think. That's the real framework. You may like it, you may not like it, but it's not that they don't like Ukraine. It's not that. They're all saying, yes, we are for you. And when you tell them that I'm from Ukraine, they start hugging and asking questions. How's your family? How are you doing? They really are concerned. But they're telling, we can sacrifice even America to win over Satan, but you're asking us to forfeit our goals for Ukraine. So this is the grand narrative, and this is a sort of religious war going between Republicans and Democrats in the United States. And the degree of heat is really the degree of civil war. It's just done in Congress and politics without spilling on the streets. The only area where they can actually communicate more or less is when religious Democrats meet with religious Republicans. Then they can at least find some common ground. And a lot of things are being discussed in churches here, which is a bit different for us, a bit strange. And I'm using the opportunity that Vasily has provided on his platform, and I'm trying to explain the real situation here on the ground. Since I am an openly religious person, I declare that, and I'm open about it. So I can communicate with certain figures with whom I couldn't have communicated otherwise. Very different political and other economic weight. But on the religious elevator, we can communicate together in the same room. And I'm learning that situation from the inside. There would not be any other line for me to get to communicate with these forces. And when people are people asking me whom do I represent here, I represent Ukrainian interests, but myself, right? And I'm communicating with people that I get these opportunities from a religious perspective to communicate on these topics. So for them, it is angle of holy war. Not that they do not like Ukraine. They basically can sacrifice the whole world as long as they win over Satan. Because for them, LGBTQ and all these modern fashions, that is pure Satanism. And they're telling me that Ukraine, you're basically appealing to them saying, guys, hang on. But they're actually of a point that Putin is defending more conservative values than you do in Ukraine. So you have to explain that Putin has a criminal mindset, not conservative mindset. And this is the Russian psychology. Just watch their TV series, right? The Word of a Thug and the other series that they're very popular there. And they're asking, so why did you sign Istanbul declarations? Why do you popularize LGBTQ in your schools? Why do you have a transgender speaking for territorial defense? It was removed already, but he was there, right? Or she? So for us, this is the war with Putin's regime and Moscow. And for them, this is persecution of church and defending the rights of church. And I was at one of the congresses of Republicans here, and here one of the statements, one of the speakers started with persecution of church in Ukraine, and I saw how the public reacted to that. And you start to explain to them that yes, this specific church was infiltrated by Moscow agents and all, and they're parrying this with questions. Then okay, attack those who are the agents. Don't attack the whole church, and it's difficult to defend it. They often see Ukraine as a battle hammer for the leftists with whom they fight for life and death. And it's a hard no from them to keep investing into the battle hammer. We will not be funding Satanism. That's what they tell you. And if you knew the real situation on the front, you'd probably on that political religious front here, you'd probably be even more pessimistic than I am. We will not fund Satanism. And if you come to them with a question, okay, what can be done? Well, stop attacking church, stop promoting LGBT, make sure you communicate more with us, because what we see is that Ukraine is corrupt. We sent you those 12 questions. Where's your logic? Where do your money go for? And this is all just the top level, the deeper reasons I just named. And I can probably finish you with a finish blow right now. Yeah, please. So I'm using these connections here since spring of 22, just when Russian troops withdrew from Kiev. I was trying to organize with some good fellows in the government who were supportive to get more Republicans to visit Ukraine. First Rammstein started in April, and we started that work even before that. And there was one of the episodes there, 3 times. Great people, with my humble participation, agreed for the leading Republicans, one of the older and most influential ones, to visit Ukraine to communicate with our government. Because it was a false strategy for our country to play just with Democrats. And we're talking about bipartisan, right? But what happened in reality, they came over 3 times, and most of them are over 70 years old. So for them, such a trip is already a trial. Their security service also told them to not go, but they still managed to come. They actually visited Bucha, and yeah, they made a great effort. And 3 times they were turned away at the last moment. They're already in Kiev, they agreed the dates, times, and then it gets canceled once they're in Kiev. So on the 3rd time, they asked, are you guys nuts? Are we kids for you? Senators who have been in politics since 1984, who've been helping Reagan to destroy Soviet Union. They're basically speaking common language, saying we're not dogs that come at your whistle. And we just closed the topic. That was a year and a half ago. Now we have a whole group from Ukrainian government, Stefanchuk, Yermak, many congressmen and other people and representatives. And they're explaining that it'll be a catastrophe if Ukraine doesn't get enough support. And some of them asked me, reached out to me saying that, hey, Since you have a direct connection with these guys, maybe you can arrange more. What can be done? I told them, you guys are late for a year and a half at least, and I don't know what to do. Those who didn't come in time, they were late. Vasily, would you deal with people who set a meeting for you 3 times? You flew across the ocean and 3 times they canceled it. I understand what you're talking about, Alexei, but if you gauge what is on the scale, right? If there is many lives of people of Ukraine, right? Oh yeah, that's why I'm explaining it over and over again. And that's what they're retorting me with. Now you'll understand that in its fullness. And they're saying, guys, it's not about life. Life is nothing in the face of God and Satan. We are ready to sacrifice our own life, right? Not even talking about yours. For them, the victory in this war is more important than our issues. Look, I have a serious crumbling in my soul right now. My hair is raising on my back. On one hand, from the north, from Russia, we're being told that there are Nazis, fascists, neo-Nazis, etc. And from the West, they're telling, not that it's here in Ukraine, but in general, that there is a fight of Lord and Satan. Yes, exactly, Vasily. This is very strange, right? But here's a question. How do we work with them that they still believe that picture to be true? I'm telling them, guys, Ukraine is the biggest country per capita with religious organizations. Not even the United States are there. 78% of Ukrainians consider themselves to be religious. Not even the United States beat that. And they're saying, yes, right, that's curious. Let's take a look. And that's why I'm spending my time here, because I think that's the only hope that I have in these explanations of that big explanatory campaign. I call it a campaign Wide Open Eyes, trying to add a little more to the scales of Ukraine. And in live conversation, that chemistry works way better, right, than communicating with somebody from across the ocean. That's why I'm meeting here in person, giving interviews, drawing more attention to myself, trying to communicate with as wide group as I can, right? Because ex-advisor to the office of Zelensky, his position is different. Let's listen to him, right? This is different. This is not calling somebody from across the ocean. This is actual physical meeting here. So I'm using it by hook and by crook to find a way to get into their souls. And I'm trying to explain that, yes, we are making mistakes, but we are talking about survival. And I'm switching to theological terms, right? If you want to communicate about Satan and metaphysics and all that, and I change the pain of discussion as well. From the point of view of Ukraine, that seems really strange, but that's what it is. Right. Putin, in my opinion, is Satan, killing civilians and all. Well, yeah, they don't unfortunately think so. Some of them are saying that he's Satan, but the others are saying that he is standing on conservative values and he was forced to do that. And yeah, it's winning over individual hearts and souls. There are no clear Republicans and Democrats as two groups. There are 6 groups we have to deal with, right? There are ultra-Democrats with, what's his name? Bernie Sanders, right, who said that Gulag is great and all the Trump supporters need to go to Gulag. Then there are ultra-Republicans who believe that Democrats are in the world conspiracy and they're abusing children and using all kind of weird conspiracy theories. Then there is a couple of camps of just Democrats and Republicans who are centrists, who actually communicate with each other. And then there are more radical, somewhere in between the extreme and the center, who communicate less. So there are 6 groups overall. Trump and his supporters are closer to conservatives. In his surroundings, there are a lot of ultra-conservatives. Some of them came out today actually and said, yeah, stop supporting Ukraine. We spent more money than the cost of all bridges in the United States. So to translate that in a usual language, let them die, but we'll have bridges. And this is rather difficult conversations to have. And the worst part is that we missed time or missed a window of opportunity. We should have been doing that way earlier. Alexei, I think I'm not going to go to sleep tonight. I'll be digesting all that you've said. I hope our viewers will be in a better shape. Guys, we have 26,000 watching us live and only 9,000 likes. Please, I don't like to state that, but please click that like button while you can. And by the way, using this opportunity, I also put the fundraiser for our military. So please participate if you can. This is for our warfighters who are engaging Russians in one of the important directions, 82nd Brigade. They are very active and very effectively fighting in the hottest spot of the front right now. Their transport vehicle got destroyed, the one they use for recon and evacuating the wounded. So please help us to get the funds for this vehicle. All right, so not to mix, this link will be on Alexei's version of the stream and in his Telegram. Because right now, if you go to my stream, there's a different link there that's to a different fundraiser. Right. Vasily is gathering for 72nd Brigade, right? Right. And I'm gathering for 82nd Brigade. So, guys, if you can support both, please do that or pick the one you can. Now, once again, I understand many of you do not have enough money to support others. But even if you have very little, you can just send 1 hryvnia. And because the soldier sitting in the trench, he hears that click, ding on his cell phone. That's the money arrived. And that's attention. That's attention and affection that you are sending to them. So if you cannot send 100, send 10. If you cannot send 10, send 1. Because this is a very important moral component that supports our soldiers in thinking that they're not for naught there at the front, that people do care about them and try to help them. So on the moral side, it's very important. And this is a very cool idea. Thank you, Olexiy. I hope our viewers also will value that you can send not just money, but a signal of your love and your support. Right, I communicate with them a lot, and they're telling me that they are actually fighting in the trench, and their phone keeps pinging. So the whole group, the whole troop hears that, and their moods go up. Right, that means we're not here, we're not forgotten by everybody. People are supporting us. And I understand many people don't have money, but at least, 1 hryvnia, that's not a big expense. It's a message. It's a message of love. I'm with you. I support you. Thank you, soldier. This is a very cool message. Thank you, Olexiy. A couple more questions from our viewers. You already touched upon this topic. Why Ukrainian viewers still watch Russian TV, like The Word of a Thug? Well, because viewers, they demand certain content, right? They have soul longings or aesthetic longings to watch something. And if there are no Ukrainian TV series, they'll be watching Russian. So you think we need to have certain content on our media? I'll go back to Lenin here, the boss of Soviet propaganda and the Soviet Union at the early inception. He basically mentioned that movies are the most important art for the Soviet regime, given that many people were illiterate back then, and the movies actually played a large role because it's easy to convey certain thoughts with a picture. These days, people don't read much as well, so it's movies again for other reasons, but it definitely is movies, and we need to reflect on that. And as somebody who is dabbling a lot in psychology, unclosed wounds, they actually affect a lot of issues in the future. A wound in the past means probably a big black hole in the future. So people want to reflect often to our past, to the lives and situations lived in the USSR and the fall of USSR and what happened after. So one of the things we failed, I think, to reflect properly on is after the collapse of Soviet Union, and it's not too much media, too much TV series on this topic. And people would be watching whatever they can find. So they would be watching The Word of a Thug, right? Or they would be watching American movie about Chernobyl. By the way, American movie. Because it fits their longings. All right, so if we just drop where the TV series come from, let's talk about the content, right? For example, when they're Dancing with the Stars, that have a lot of success on the TV and people immediately surge to dancing clubs, and all of a sudden there are a lot more people learning to dance. Then there is a very successful series about fighting or chess. People go and go to chess clubs or go to fight clubs. So when they watch The Life of a Thug, do you think they'll go and start gathering their gangs here? I don't think so, because in a mobilized country fighting the war, it's a very questionable idea to start gangster activities because patrols will just shoot you at a sight. So those who may have ideas about that, I would recommend to not go in this direction. But if we're talking about the symbolic support of a certain protest via the characters of movie, that's a whole other conversation. But we went, unfortunately, with the simplest path, just prohibited it, right? What are the youth that are in a protest time of their life, right? When they see something prohibited, they just go there because they think the truth is there. By prohibiting, we just reinforce the interest to the series. Well, Olexiy, they did forbid the use of Odnoklassniki and in contact Russian social media. It kind of worked. Right, those are social media. In the social media, you need to be active. You need to be participating. And if you're facing some punishment, then every time going there, you are putting yourself in a position of risk. But watching TV series, there's no real risk. You can use VPN to do that. Not a big issue. Especially for youth, we currently have an epidemic of suicides. Kids are jumping from the roofs. So the situation is not good. And they would be looking for alternatives, rebellion, not acceptance of this world, protest. And now we have TV series that are generally about that, and it's also prohibited. So perhaps definitely worth watching. And that's the risk. All right, another question. Is it possible for us to shift any serious war actions on the territory of Russia? I don't think so. And I think President also spoke to that. They initially allowed some operations by RDK and Legion Freedom of Russia. They were not ready for this activity, but now they shut their border pretty well. So the next question, why is the accent always moving between Russia, United States and Ukraine, or Russia, China, and Southeast Asia and United States? Where do you think the hotspot will be in the coming year or two? I suspect it'll be in the Asian part. Can you elaborate? Sure, because the dictators of the world understand that the West doesn't really have capacity to react to their shenanigans these times. An example would be Guyana and Venezuela. Now the drug regime of Maduro is annexing the territory larger than Greece, where a lot of American oil companies are represented and working. And this is the only English-speaking territory in Latin America, which is also a British protectorate, which is essentially a repetition of 1982 Falkland War, when Britain intervened and kicked Argentina out. These days, neither America nor Britain probably will interfere. And why Maduro is thinking he can? Because Crimea was annexed and nothing. Putin started the whole war in Ukraine and nothing. And people are saying the West will wake up. I'm telling the West will, or actually had a lot of reasons to wake up already. I'm seriously concerned if it will. Do you know what Monroe Initiative is? Monroe Doctrine? It was adopted a couple centuries ago, an old consensus decision by American elites, American leadership, that everything in the Western Hemisphere is to be protected by the United States because it's its interest. And what? Nothing is happening there. The leader of opposition completely failed in Colombia, and Maduro is now advancing his interests into Guyana. And what? And nothing. Have you seen how Steinmeier, president of Germany, was received in Qatar? Protocol service didn't even show at the airport. He was waiting for half an hour in his plane till they figured something out. And instead of turning the plane around and leaving, he stayed there begging for audience. And when Putin came over to Arab Emirates, remember, they had the sky painted in Russian colors. There were F-16s flying, a couple of cars with the inscription of Russian police on it in Cyrillic. And after that, he conducted negotiations with the president of Iran for 5 hours. Today in Africa, President of Belarus is making his visit. They're now already talking with the Global South about active interference into the global Northwest. And they're already figuring ways out to interfere into American elections and The main goal is to make sure that America would understand that it's losing to the global south, and they essentially are trying to achieve a more just world as they see it, and they have a rather good potential to get there. They understand each other, China, Africa, a bunch of Arab countries. They're using all different systems and ways to push that through United Nations and those mechanisms using BRICS system. They are essentially creating zones of conflict for the West, where the West bogs itself down. An example would be a terrorist act of the 7th of October in Israel, after which two things were destroyed, I'd say even three. First of all is the agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which was almost signed, peace accords, that would have changed the situation in the Middle East. The trade corridor that Biden announced on G20 summit, India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Greece, that was an alternative to Chinese Silk Road. And India was announced to be, or proclaimed to be, new China, and I suspect China immediately reacted. And third, they created a conflict zone where already 2 American aircraft carriers are present on service to hold supposedly Iran, although Iran attacked American bases in Iraq and Syria, and nothing happened. Because I guess America is really worn out by Iraq and Afghanistan. They're concerned about losing their soldiers and actually conducting active fight against those provocations. So perhaps the West will awaken, but why do you think that the West would be, in this case, represented by Roosevelt and American Marines, figuring out how to bring freedom to Europe? Awoken West may be a different animal, different creature. They may awaken up with a calculator in hand and calculating the type of peace they want, whom they want to deal with. So for now, we can see that the global south is advancing its agenda, and the global west is really having a hard time resisting to that encroachment. And they're creating new hot zones where America will have to send their aircraft carriers, and yet they would still be afraid to really act on these threats. Hezbollah is attacking Israel. Israel is fighting with Hezbollah, but no American vessel shot back at Hezbollah. Not a single issue. And I can outline again the areas of potential conflict: Southern and Central America, that's Guyana story; Taiwan or Myanmar in Southeast Asia, another one; Korea, also possible; countries of Baltic, Poland and Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and Finland. Here and there, by different means, I understand there'll be created areas of concern. Could be information means, could be refugees storming the borders, could be hot conflicts. And also Africa, leaders of 3 pro-French countries that were in G5, big pro-French group of countries, they announced that they're not going to work with France anymore. So France was expelled from Africa. This is another loss of the West, and they cannot do anything with it at the moment. And there are definite Russian and Iranian ears sticking out from there. And Turkey, by the way, is also conducting a very anti-West agenda locally. So these tensions will increase, will continue growing, so that the West would bog itself down further and would be essentially losing on a larger scale, and Global South would be recruiting more supporters, indicating the weakness of the West. And I think this will be the main red line on the background of the main election campaign in the United States, plus Russian offensive that will be thrown on the scales. So how is the West responding to that? Instead of increasing the supplies of armaments to Ukraine and other allies, the West is trying, America is trying to take them away from us. I remind that on the 15th of December, there'll be a big gathering at the European Union. They'll be discussing about Ukrainian perspectives to join EU, and they'll be talking about 50 billions transferred to Ukraine to support their economics. Germans already initiated a conversation. How about we withdraw 20 billion from that amount? Well, Scholz came out today and said that if the partners are tired, we still need to continue supporting Ukraine. Well, here's the thing. Germany doesn't really have much to transfer to Ukraine. Bundeswehr is really bloodless at the moment. And that's why they're estimations recently came up when they said that Bundeswehr would probably resist Russia for a couple of days or a week, maybe at most. And Stolz is not the only person of power in Germany. His support rating is only around 20%. They have opposition that is actively bringing up the question of decreasing monetary support to Ukraine, plus Bulgaria, Fico, plus issues in Poland, plus issues in Netherlands. So there is definitely a right turn in Europe, and a lot of right turn in Europe is standing on supporting Russia. That means against Ukraine. And everything is rather complicated, more complicated than it looks like when you're looking from Kiev. Next question, not a question, more of an appeal. Alexei, can you find time to meet Ukrainian diaspora in the United States? Sure, reach out to me. I'll find a way to organize that. We can speak Ukrainian and discuss that here. They can write to my administrators of Apeiron School, and they'll transfer that information over to me. All right, so as an answer, all information is on Instagram. Find the administrators of Apeiron School, they'll transfer the information. From another viewer, since what moment counteroffensive was derailed? I think from the very beginning. On the 4th of June, we started, and then, as Washington Post wrote, Zaluzhny disappeared from the comm lines and didn't even answer for several weeks the calls by American troops commander in Europe. And I think he was right doing so. I suspect that, and it's my hypothesis, that from the very beginning, Zaluzhny already calculated his chances, and he understood that Americans and other Western allies would be pushing him to undertake counteroffensive in a way that will be devastating with his resources, so he picked his own game. And in order to avoid idiotic questions at the most difficult time of counteroffensive, he probably just avoided picking up the phone. And I think he was right, because unlike Americans and unlike some representatives of our political leadership, he knows the capabilities of our military, and he knows what can be done and what cannot be done. Another question that is often repeated, Alexei, what do you think about elimination of Kiva, the elimination by our special services of collaborants and traitors? Well, I'm in a difficult moral situation here. I definitely am not feeling any joy about this, because you should not be enjoying the death of people. And when I'm asked what can you enjoy, I would say, well, you can be happy about successes of your special services, about your army. That you can be happy about. And let me topple my rating completely. Let me just sink it down now. Let me pose the question. Is it okay to assassinate a person who disagrees with you? And remember in Taras Bulba, when a person left Ukraine for Poland, and Taras Bulba is being asked, so why is it so terribly wrong to change your point of view? And the second thing, from a religious standpoint, there is good and evil in the world. So in the case of Kiva, I think most of likely he was an agent of Russian services for a while, who was a colonel of Ministry of Internal Affairs, who was a congressman, a leader of party in Ukraine, who had access to classified information and very likely caused significant damage to Ukraine's security. And this is a real grounds to pose a question about his liquidation. Not in terms of revenge, but in terms to preclude further damage, especially if any operative data indicates that he is aiding enemy in some other way or may aid in the future. Right. So he became large propagandist or some other thing. But abstracting myself from his last name and that specific person, I would want these events to not be just a pass-through thing for our society. Because every death, every kill on the front and anywhere shouldn't be an easy decision. These decisions will be made, and of course we will see probably more of those, but I'm trying to warn our society from being too giddy about that. Right? Because we had another situation when a congressman, Dubinsky, was put in jail in Ukraine. What kind of society are we, right? In this case, we should not be taking these issues too easy. If a congressman can be put in jail, what about the average citizen who has no status, no protection, no publicity, right? This is a nightmare scenario. We shouldn't be moving in that direction. That's why, as an act of war, I would, yes, support that. But as a moral dilemma, I don't have a full answer to that, and I don't want us to treat these things lightly. And what I absolutely do not accept is our giddy memes in the interwebs about Kiva or about that shark attack on the Russian and Egypt before. I cannot be happy about these events, and I cannot condone them. And I'm not trying to play saint here. I'm not carrying the book and the harp, and I'm not carrying a halo around my head. At different times, I did, how do I put it delicately, put my effort into ending the career of some people who caused significant harm to Ukraine. So as a person coming from the practical side of these things, I would say it's a big moral dilemma. And us as a society, we should be concerned with taking it too lightly. I'm talking not as a person who is a complete theoretician who doesn't know what the blood of your dead enemy smells like. I'm talking as a practitioner. It's got to be done very carefully. All right, friends, I will thank Olexiy together with you. 28,000 are watching us live. Please, those who didn't, click the like button. And right now, if you have not done that yet, subscribe to Alexei's channel. And of course, help the fundraiser that Vasily is doing for 72nd Brigade and for my fundraiser for 82nd Brigade. And thank you guys. I really appreciate a chance answering your questions. Ask more. And do not forget to subscribe to all of our channels, including Privateer Station, that is translating and bringing these conversations to you in English. Thank you all, and we'll see you in about a week. Take care of yourself, Olexiy. You viewers also stay safe. Ukraine will prevail. All those who write in the comments, glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. Till next time, Olexiy.